PGA.com today.
Tonight, several developing stories as we come on the air. The showdown in the Senate over President Trump's Supreme Court pick, Neil Gorsuch. Democrats tonight voting to block him. Republicans now preparing for the so-called nuclear option, changing the rules to push him through with a simple majority. Our team standing by. Also breaking tonight, the deadly terror attack in Russia. This evening, you will see the video from right after the attack. Passengers trapped, running for their lives. Tonight, the death toll and news on a bomb found in a second location. In this country, the deadly storms at this hour, the tornado watch is up right now. More than a dozen tornadoes reported already, a mother and child killed. Millions bracing from Florida to the Carolinas, blinding rain right up into the Northeast. The urgent manhunt at this hour, the veteran police officer gunned down as he was reporting to work. And our Bob Woodruff reports from inside North Korea tonight. After President Trump's warning, if China doesn't solve North Korea, the U.S. will. Tonight, Bob asks to be shown their missile launch sites, where they take him.
This is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Monday night, and we begin with that historic showdown in the Senate involving President Trump's pick for the Supreme Court. For so many Americans, the high court is what presidential elections are all about. Tonight, President Trump's nominee, Neil Gorsuch, has cleared a key committee now, setting up a vote in the full Senate by Friday. But Democrats plan to filibuster. They needed enough Democrats to pull it off. Tonight, they have that number. But the Republicans are preparing their own plan, the so-called nuclear option, changing the rules to get Judge Gorsuch through. Here's ABC's chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl.
Tonight on Capitol Hill, a Supreme Court showdown, likely to end with a move so controversial, it's called the nuclear option. It comes after Democrats, one by one, came forward to say they will vote no on President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch.
I cannot support this nomination.
I will not, I cannot support advancing this nomination.
I will not support Judge Gorsuch's nomination.
A handful of Democrats said they would vote yes, but now at least 42 Democrats say they will not only vote against Gorsuch, but will do something that's almost never been done, use a filibuster to block his nomination. Republicans are crying foul.
If they will filibuster Neil Gorsuch, they will filibuster any nominee from a Republican president.
Now Republicans are preparing to exercise the so-called nuclear option, forcing a change in Senate rules that would mean Supreme Court nominees would no longer need 60 votes to be confirmed. Instead, a simple majority. Either party could push through a nominee with just 51 votes. Republicans acknowledge it's a move with far-reaching implications.
We're headed to a world where you don't need one person from the other side to pick a judge. And what does that mean? That means the judges are going to be more ideological, not less.
Democrats are still furious at the way Republicans treated President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, refusing to even give him a hearing for more than 9 months. Still, Democrats say today's move to filibuster President Trump's pick isn't about payback, it's about the judge.
Judge Gorsuch dodged, deflected, and obfuscated. His responses to Democratic members of this committee were cagey and evasive.
In his hearing, Gorsuch revealed little about his positions on hot-button issues like gun control and abortion, denying he's even discussed the matter with the president.
Did he ever ask you to overrule Roe v. Wade?
No, Senator.
What would he have done if he'd asked?
Senator, I would have walked out the door.
And now, with the debate raging, the Senate Majority Leader is making a firm promise.
That Neil Gorsuch will be confirmed this week.
He says Neil Gorsuch will become a justice of the Supreme Court, even if it means going nuclear.
And John Karl with us live tonight from the White House. And John, as you know, some Republican senators say they are reluctant to use the nuclear option to confirm Judge Gorsuch, but no such reluctance from President Trump?
David, the president actually endorsed the idea of going nuclear even before he nominated Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. They know that if there is another Supreme Court vacancy, and this White House believes there will be, it will make it easier for the president to get his next nominee confirmed as well.
All right, we'll be watching this all week. John Karl leading us off on a Monday. Thanks, John. The other major headline we're following, the deadly terror attack in the subway in St. Petersburg, Russia. And tonight we have new reporting on a second bomb discovered. The first device full of metal shrapnel ripping through a subway car, passengers staggering out onto that platform. Tonight, hear the video of the moments right after. And this question, of course, who is behind it? Here's ABC's chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross.
The cell phone videos of chaos and carnage today on a Russian subway platform are what law enforcement officials around the world fear could happen in their city. Thick, acrid smoke, the mangled door of a subway car, passengers crying for help. At least 11 people were killed, their bodies pulled out of the wreckage. This bloodied woman was one of some 40 other passengers wounded in the blast, all from a single bomb that went off as the train traveled between two stations in mid-afternoon. Less than 1 hour later, officials discovered and disarmed a second bomb in this black bag, loaded with shrapnel, planted at another St. Petersburg subway station. It all happened in Russia's most westernized city, until now free from terror attacks, on the same day that Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived in St. Petersburg as part of his re-election campaign. Putin said it was too early to say who was responsible, but Russian experts say it was clearly meant to send him a message.
Regardless of who the perpetrators were, they likely knew that Putin was going to be in town, and they targeted the metro, which is the easiest way to make sure that the largest number of people in that city know that there's a problem.
As he says, they likely knew Putin was in town. Brian Ross with us. Any more clues about who might be responsible?
Well, at this point, David, there's been no claim of responsibility, but there are no shortage of suspects either, including ISIS, which has vowed revenge for the role Russia has played in Syria, and Chechen extremist groups. They've carried out more than a dozen bombings in recent years in Russia.
All right, Brian Ross with us tonight. Brian, thank you. We turn next here to the severe weather threat. The watch is up at this hour after deadly storms already. A state of emergency in Louisiana, tens of thousands without power in Georgia, and tornado watches all the way up to North Carolina for much of this day. This twister in Louisiana, watch it lifting up a car there in the background, then dropping it back down. Powerful winds destroying this gas station in Alexandria, Louisiana. And tonight we're watching heavy rains and a flood watch reaching all the way to the northeast. A very tough night ahead. ABC's Wjla Benitez in the storm zone.
Tonight, severe storms packing high winds, sending this tarp flying off a baseball field in Phoenix City, Alabama, injuring a player, even lifting the roof right off this fire station in Carroll County, Georgia, and whipping through Atlanta, a ground stop at the city's airport. This weekend near Alexandria, Louisiana,
we're inside the tornado right now.
Storm chasers driving right into this apparent tornado. In Lafayette, an auto shop surveillance cameras capturing vehicles flipping over.
Over the last 24 hours here in Louisiana, we've seen at least 10 reported tornadoes, including an EF1 with 110-mile-per-hour winds that just tore apart this home.
Tragically, a mother and her 3-year-old daughter killed here in Breaux Bridge. The storms claiming at least 6 lives in all, including a 52-year-old woman who drowned after a flooded creek swept away her car near Jackson, Mississippi.
There were so many streets flooded, we didn't have enough barricades or enough people to cover them all.
She called 911, but soon lost contact with the operator.
And David, there is a threat for more severe storms tomorrow and Wednesday along the Gulf Coast, so residents there just have to be prepared. David?
All right, Gio, our thanks to you. Let's get right to Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z. She's tracking this all the way up the East Coast into the Northeast. Concerns tonight as well, Ginger.
That's right, for flooding, and we'll get to that. David, more than 300 severe storm reports in less than 48 hours. Many of the tornado reports from central Georgia today. But look at where those watches are in place, from North Carolina down to that tornado watch in the Florida Panhandle. So still doing this for the next couple of hours. And then that low starts to move to the north and east. And that's the first of many rounds of heavy rain that'll move places like New York City and bring some potential for flash flooding by the weekend, with all of that, of course, melting snow. And that threat Gio just mentioned, Tuesday into Wednesday, Atlanta's in it again. David?
All right, thinking of our friends in the South tonight, Ginger Z, our thanks to you. Now to the American troops overseas in Iraq, and news tonight that one of President Trump's top aides, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is in Iraq. ABC senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega.
Jared Kushner on a secret mission to Iraq. The White House senior advisor and presidential son-in-law there in the office of Iraq's prime minister and in a helicopter with military brass, visiting Iraq before even Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Why is he there and not the Secretary of State today? What's the message that the president is sending by having Jared Kushner be the one to take this trip?
I don't think it's not a binary choice. Jared's going to specifically express the commitment of the United States to the government of Iraq, meet with U.S. personnel engaged in the campaign.
This trip seeming to cement Kushner's role as a shadow Secretary of State. He is planning this week's visit of the Chinese president to Mar-a-Lago. He's also the primary White House contact for Mexico. And yes, the president has asked him to broker Middle East peace.
I'd love to have Jared helping us on deals with other nations and see if we can do peace in the Middle East and other things. He's very talented.
The president also tapping his son-in-law to reform the criminal justice system and to run the new Office of American Innovation, where the White House says he'll reform veteran care, tackle the opioid epidemic, and oversee the not-so-small feat of revamping the entire federal government.
And Cecilia Vega with us live from the White House as well tonight. Cecilia, you did ask the White House press secretary today, how will Jared Kushner be able to do all of this?
Yeah, David, I did, and they are defending his jam-packed schedule, saying that he's delegating, working with several teams. But you heard it, his job description, David, is a really long one. Everything from solving Middle East peace to revamping the government.
Cecilia Vega with us on a Monday night. Thank you, Cecilia. Next tonight here to North Korea and President Trump's warning that if China doesn't fix the problem, the U.S. will step in and deal with North Korea ourselves. ABC's Bob Woodruff tonight and his rare visit inside North Korea. And you're about to see where they take him when Bob asks to see their missile launch sites.
Tonight, a rare journey inside North Korea, just as tensions with the U.S. are escalating. While we're on the ground, President Trump delivers a new message, telling the Financial Times the U.S. is prepared to act alone to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions, saying, quote, if China is not going to solve North Korea, we will. These comments come after the North Koreans have made a show of testing several ballistic missiles during the beginning of the Trump administration.
We put in all sorts of requests to visit out here, the launch locations where the missiles are being launched.
But instead, the North Koreans take us deep into the country to see another prized achievement, the country's high-end ski resort.
There's any other guests here, do you think, or we're the only ones?
It's eerily empty. The people on the slopes skiing the patriotic music coming from oversized screens. Meanwhile, several hundred miles away, the U.S. and South Korean troops continue to conduct joint military exercises. The top North Korean official for U.S. affairs tells me our army is at the highest alert.
And Bob Woodruff is just back to Beijing after his trip inside North Korea. And Bob, you reported there on President Trump's tough stance, saying the U.S. is willing now to bypass China and take on North Korea directly if China doesn't solve the problem. But what did you hear from North Koreans on this front?
North Korea made it very, very clear to me, David, that they would prefer, in fact, they demanded they speak only with the U.S. and not including all these other countries like China, South Korea, Japan. On the other hand, China really wants these countries involved. North Korea, but they only want to negotiate directly only with the Trump administration. David?
Bob Woodruff and his rare view inside North Korea. Bob, our thanks to you tonight. We are also on the scene of a disaster in South America. You're about to see the grim aftermath of devastating flooding and mudslides. And take a look at this tonight. This is the list of the dead and the missing. So many of them children. ABC's chief national correspondent Tom Llamas has arrived on the scene in Colombia, and here's what he found.
High above the disaster zone, you can see all of the damage, but down on the ground, you can feel the pain. This is where the dead, more than 260, are waiting to be identified.
As you enter Mocoa, this is one of the grim signs you first see. This is outside the cemetery. You can see them bringing in one of the bodies. And then these are all people who lived in Mocoa. They're trying to identify some of the bodies that are here.
These catastrophic images still fresh in the minds of those who survived. A wall of water, mud, and debris crashed into the town in the middle of the night. So powerful, it pushed cars on top of trees. And more than 60 children dying when this avalanche of death came rolling in. We met Octavio Cardone inside the town's hospital. Every inch of his body scratched, bruised, or broken. But his story is even more painful. He tells me how he lost his grip on his 9-year-old daughter when the wall of water hit. She and his wife among the hundreds still missing. His 6-year-old son dying in the disaster.
And David, that father we met in the hospital who likely lost his entire family is now begging that the city set up some type of warning system so this never happens again. David?
Just a devastating scene. Tom Yamas, our thanks to you tonight as well. And there is still much more ahead on World News Tonight this Monday. The new health headline about aspirin and cancer. Also the developing story of a veteran police officer killed, gunned down, reporting for duty, and there is an intense manhunt at this hour. The deadly explosion killing 3 people, the boiler launching through the roof of one company, smashing through the roof of another. And later here tonight, Made in America is back. The lumberjacks hiking through the woods months ago. And there's a big reason for this, and it has to do with something millions will be watching tonight. Any guesses?
Our generation really has gotten used to a whole new world.
It's been hard sometimes, but switching to consumer cellular, easy.